How you doing?
Yes, good, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm doing pretty good. Um, just yeah, head kind of filled with thoughts. I watched your latest 2020 video today, and that was really exciting to watch. A lot of
Cool. Okay.
yeah, a lot of ideas I'd been sort of thinking about in that video as well. So yeah, that's kind of my mood. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm just, intermittently pulling my face out of watching videos of police brutality and,
Right.
uh, you know,
Yeah.
um, it's hard for me to, it's hard for me to look away. Um, per, I guess particularly since I didn't realize how many people I knew who, I don't know if they just want to write it off as a psyop, right? It's like,
Mm.
oh, this is some controlled. You're being made to be, you know, you're not really upset.
Mm.
There is a psychological operation to upset you so that you're what? So that you're like siding with the argument that police shouldn't be brutal. I was already on that side. You didn't have to manipulate me. Um,
Yeah.
if anything, I think this is. I mean, whatever. I didn't. I don't want to. I don't want to take the conversation there. I don't. I don't.
Oh, well, I mean, I know what you mean though, and it's weird how there's this sort of I don't know if we spoke about this yet last time as well, how sometimes there are these kind of currents of thought, that we call like that are included within like conspiracy thinking, for example, that present themselves as being countercultural or that they are going against the status quo, and yet they seem to be they seem to be sort of promoting exactly the kind of support for the status quo that I, like what you just said. Like it seems to present a series of arguments that suggest that you should not believe anything that goes against what the status quo. Yeah, I mean it's confusing to say, but yeah, what you were just saying.
Yeah. No, no. I get. It's funny. I didn't think of it that way. Right. It's like
Mm,
there. So it's this weird kind of. I don't know. Like there's this phrase in conspiracy culture that's called gatekeeping, and I don't know if it's exactly that, but it's almost like, hey, don't worry. We'll tell you when to be upset.
mm, mm-hmm.
Right. It's like, oh, that thing that's happening that people seem to be upset about. Don't worry about it. That's just some leftist thing. You don't even have to think about that. We'll tell you when to really be upset. Like, don't worry. When as soon as
Mm,
as soon as they ask you to wear a mask in Costco, or as soon as some ridiculous notion comes down the line that you're coming. You know, I just don't understand, man. So
mm.
I have I have a question. You said you watched this 2020 video.
Yep.
And I'm curious, like, I don't know what year you got into a lot of this stuff.
Mm.
In the stuff that I've been putting together, is most of that stuff sort of known to you? Or you, um,
Mm. Uh, I think most of it. So I kind of got into, I guess 2012 was when I got into a lot of this stuff through discovering Terence McKenna. A lot of what you mentioned in the video, like a lot of the stuff pertaining to, let's say, conspiracy culture, I got into through the Sync book kind of group. Through
wow,
and,
okay, interesting.
yeah, like and sort of and Robert Anton Wilson, that kind, like I'd never sort of really encountered a lot of that before. So So yeah, I'm not like super familiar with a lot of the specific like syncs or the specific threads. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I thought it was very interesting. The stuff that, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, which bits you.
Oh no, it's just yeah, I'm just trying to make sense. Like I I feel particularly, I mean, I feel worked up for a lot of reasons, but it just blows my mind like the people who have shouted the loudest for the longest time about these injustices.
Mm,
Um they're the ones who seem the most dismissive of it at the moment. It's or like when um
yeah.
like your Alex Jones's. I mean, Alex Jones is the person. I mean, he's a piece of shit,
Mm,
but he is the person that I don't. There's this phrase, the term like "waking up"
hmm
is such a is such a loaded one. But there was a video of his. It was just like literally just footage that he had released. It wasn't like a video it wasn't like video he produced, but it was something that he
Right.
documented or someone gave him the footage and he put it out there, and it scared the shit out of me years ago, and it quote unquote woke me up to the reality of how dangerous these things could be. And it was all about basically like martial law, what this would look like, what the potentials are, what the different legalities, what were the basically what the powers that be, how they were rewrite. Like, these guys are like libertarian constitutionalists. So everything's like, hey, they're like overriding our constitutional protections. You're not supposed to be allowed to,
Mm,
just have military in the streets, and you can't have military um, policing inside the country. I mean, I learned what the Posse Comitatus Act was through Alex Jones. It was something that he mentioned multiple times. That has now been suspended in New York City, and
right. Yeah.
and the guy. I mean, if you shouted warnings about something for 20 years and then it happened, I would expect you would be on the side of saying it's a bad thing,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
It, but if it's
Right.
like,
What is he saying? I'm curious. Like I
I have no
haven't.
idea what Alex Jones is currently saying.
Right. But that
So
kind of. Yeah.
sorry, there's probably some false equivalency there in the sense of like I'm saying like that culture, that corner of the conspiracy
Yeah.
world that is what I know them as, is like strict constitution, anti-authoritarian, all this sort of stuff. At least like that's their proposed stance.
Mm,
And for the last week, my if I go on Facebook, I see, sure, I see my friends that are either minorities or fucking rational, healthy, compassionate people
mm,
saying, "Hey, this is terrible." But I see a lot of people that I know either as libertarians or in that conspiracy realm and all that, all the people who should be most vocal
mm.
right now. And I just see a lot of them just dismissing it as, oh man, this is a psyop. This is some, can't
Yeah. Yeah.
this is a state, whatever. Like this is if you're protesting, you're a pawn of George Soros, right? It's like, so
Mm,
you were the guys who talked about, talked openly about revolution 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, when I signed into Facebook, I saw at least 15 different people sharing memes of different founding fathers, and Constitution and all this. And this was about the coronavirus lockdown,
Yeah.
right? And they're saying, "Oh, this is tyranny, and we need to." I literally saw about 15 different people sharing these things like, "Hey, it is our constitutional right to overthrow a tyrannical government," and all this sort of stuff. And this was all about coronavirus lockdown. And 2 weeks later, these are the same people who are like, "Oh, these protests are, some bullshit ploy."
Yeah.
And I just, uh, the cognitive dissonance is so strong that I don't know. I don't know how to begin to approach this subject because I'm really. That's why I asked, like, hey, when did you get into this? Where did you, sort of what corner were you coming from? Because I don't live in that corner. Even at the time, I wasn't. I was never a big Alex Jones guy, but certainly aware of him, and I just used him as an example. It's just so you have to realize I did for years being this sort of public person, like doing different interviews on different like conspiracy websites and stuff like that. Like people would send me friend requests. Like I ran my Facebook like that was like my, I don't know, like promotional page, right?
Yeah.
And it's only in the last few years that I'm like, I don't give a shit about any of that, and this is just for me and my friends. But I still have a ton of Facebook friends, quote unquote, that are just people who, after I would do an interview on some conspiracy show, I would get a bunch of friend requests of like, oh, cool, you're also into these conspiracy things. So I have a lot of conspiracy theorists on my Facebook, and I'm watching them change their story so often.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with trying to figure out how to. All right, so just here's the thing. My plan for these 2020 series from over a year ago, my goal with this series was to show how that conspiracy culture got hijacked. It's like this is like a deconstruction of an Orwellian, like the classic 1984, like, hey, now we're at war with Eurasia or something. It's like, oh, we've always been that type of thing. I literally am like, hey, I'm going to document what has happened in the conspiracy world over the last 15, 16 years and show step by step how things were changed. And then suddenly when that script is flipped, I can point back and say, hey, this is what was being said here, and this is what was being said here, and you're fucking not only being lied to, but you are a victim of a massive psyop yourselves. And I feel like that psyop, for lack of a better term, was too fast for me. And in the time it's taken me to produce this, they're already flipping the script and already like, right? They're accusing anyone who questions their rationale as being part of it, as being either a victim, a useful idiot, an unwitting victim, or some sort of agent of this, what they are calling a psyop. And it's like, fuck, this is. I don't know how to keep fighting that. If people don't want to look, but I'm going to keep trying. Like I said, I that is the plan. that has been the plan all along. I've started um, working on the fifth episode last night, um, and yeah, I don't know. I'm
No,
just
that's cool.
upset. I'm just upset, but also like I think I think this time the script flipped so quickly that
Yeah.
maybe some people will be hip to it. Like the fact that they went from in such a short time from
Yeah, yeah.
protesting, like they're out there, AK-47s, shouting at police, saying, let us out of COVID lockdown and we're going to overthrow the government and all this sort of shit, to 2 weeks later saying the opposite. I feel like that was a very public display of hypocrisy, and I'm hoping that they will be unable to recover from that.
Mm, mm. Yeah.
It's my very long-winded where
No,
my
man.
head's at.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird this thing you said about gatekeeping. Like, it's so strange the approach in a lot of these kinds of arguments, the approach towards emotion, like you said, because I've seen it too, how it seems as if there is anything that could potentially make you sad or angry or make you feel any emotion, or if there is any display of emotion anywhere on video, in the news or anywhere, it's almost as if the first position that is jumped to is that it's staged, that it's fake, and so on. And so, if that is your baseline, like you said, it seems as if no emotion is to be trusted. It always, everything has to depend, or it's as if they seem to believe that everything, that they are being super like rational or something, that it's all about coldly analyzing emotion, not letting yourself get carried away by it, as if emotion were the enemy here, and reason is what will save them. And uh and th- th- this position seems so absolute at times, like so absolutely uh in in denial of the possibility that emotion could be trusted, that yeah, there is clearly like a bias there that is very irrational, right? Because like you said, it isn't actually rational, because their position can change so wildly that actually there isn't, it doesn't, sometimes it seems as if there isn't an actual stable ground, a set of basic assumptions that they're resting on, right? In a sense, it's almost like in a completely like psychoanalytic, like repressed way. It's as if they've, again, I'm kind of being almost like exaggerated here, but it's almost like they've repressed emotion so much that in a shadow sort of way, in an unconscious sort of way, they are just following emotion under the mask of reason or something.
Mm,
I don't know how to say it. Like it's just
yeah,
whatever
I
feels
totally get that.
whatever feels right to them, or whatever feels wrong. You know?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't know if you've studied objectivism at all, like Ayn Rand. That is
No.
basically that is basically her stance, is that right? Is literally you reject emotion and you
Hmm.
go only by reason, and that
Right.
is um, there are a slew of quasi right wing, everything from like business folk to politicians to you know quote unquote philosophers that have sort of carried on this line, and that's literally what they say they believe is like no don't go by emotion. You only go by rationale, and it's this like hard reason, and you use your superior brain to figure out the situation, and you will see they will outright laugh at the idea of like, but feelings, like,
Yeah.
oh. but I feel like this is wrong, or whatever, and it's a total rejection of that uh, on the surface. But as you say, that's a really, really potent observation. Is that what is actually happening? Is they're blowing around so wildly in the wind of getting caught up in this reactionary, maybe in their minds, maybe it's instinctual, but it seems very reactionary, very, as you say, it's emotionally charged. I think that's really, really an interesting observation, because I'm questioning, how did they lose their rationale? The thing that they claim to be their guiding force, how have they so rejected their rationality? And that's probably a really interesting method of how that would happen. Yeah, if you repress your emotions so consistently, it's just gonna bubble up and eat away at whatever rationale in your surface level is still gonna try and hold on to, like, this is me thinking rationally, even though
Yeah.
you're fucking crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you said, it's funny because it seems as if like one week they are defending one thing, the next week they're defending the other, or at least that's what it seems as if um yeah, like there is this sort of weird lack of consistency, obviously, yeah, at the bottom of it, but it's probably not perceived as that. Because when you get, I mean, it's so complicated, like you say, because when you get into that frame of mind, I guess, when you get into that sort of like seeing everything as a false flag, uh, I mean, there's something about that that's obviously, and I mean, it's tricky to talk about this because obviously it 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 would be easy to, it's so difficult. God, it's so difficult not to like accuse them of doing something that I'm not doing, but like in the sense that there's a way I could describe what's happening here in the terms of like psychosis or something like this at its worst, in that there is this thing of like gang stalking, right? This sort of paranoia that everything around you is staged. That sort of, I think, and I haven't read that much about psychosis, but just the idea that you can get into this state of mind where everything appears to be staged, and therefore you get into this really paranoid mind where it seems as if people on the street have been planted by someone to spy on you, and so on and so on. There is obviously like a kinship between that kind of conspiracy thinking and this sort of like psychosis. There's obviously a kinship between that and a sort of just general kind of shamanic sort of mystical way of seeing the world as well. Like it, and so it becomes very difficult to try and not throw the baby out with the bathwater of like because I like you say, I want to be critical of this way of thinking while without sort of throwing the reality of this sort of mystical state of mind that you can get into where everything seems symbolic. That's the tricky thing, isn't it? Because you could very easily criticize this kind of conspiracy thinking from a completely, let's say, atheist point of view, right? It's kind of trickier to criticize this form of thinking from a sort of mystico sinky kind of perspective, because yeah, I don't know, it's hard to know how to differentiate things there. I don't know.
And just to say, like, to your I don't mean this is to contradict your point,
Hmm.
but to say, as someone who experienced gang stalking, um, the
Oh, right.
point the point of it is to induce psychosis.
Right.
um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
right. I
Right.
mean, that's just to say when you're like, hey, they go hand in hand. Yes. There can be a thing where it's like almost like chicken and the egg, right? Where it's like you're so paranoid that you're afraid that everyone's out to get you, and
Mm.
then there's things where, I mean, I remember, gosh, what year was that? Probably like 2005. There was one of the main like one of the main heads of um, one of the main organizers of like anti-war protests
Mm.
in the wake of invading Iraq and Afghanistan and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, One of the main organizers literally quit and was like, "I'm out."
Mm.
Totally out. They had been harassed so much and threatened so much that like just like they got they got the fear, um, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you know that's so I'm sure different high profile, um, maybe it's a little more extreme and all these sorts of things. But I guess just to say the point is, when you say they go hand in hand, is absolutely true that they do go hand in hand because either you are paranoid and you think people are out to get you, or they harass you to the point that you go crazy because you don't know how to trust your reality anymore.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
That is literally the point of it.
No.
I want go. Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
No. Just like, yeah. Absolutely. Like, I mean, in a sense, I'm. That's the other thing. I guess I'm sort of slowly coming to the understanding that a lot of these things are are real, in the sense of, before I came at it from a completely kind of, how do I say it, like, mystical point of view, I guess, where any degree of conspiracy thinking didn't make sense to me. But I guess that's, I think I'm sort of slowly entering more into domain where I see that in order for, like, in order to take politics seriously, you need to take conspiracy thinking seriously, and therefore contemplate the possibility of these kinds of things, and obviously the reality of, like, so many activists getting killed, and stuff like there is a lot of that I also very easily fall into the sort of into the mistake of thinking that it's all just, um, that kind of a political dimension is somehow an illusion, and by falling into that, I can also sort of, like, secretly support, um, status quo kind of narratives in some way. I don't know. So yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't really know that much about gang stalking as a thing, so it was maybe sort of a bad example to use. But yeah.
No, it's a great example because it's yeah. I mean, it's I think we've all maybe that's a bold statement, but I think, as I say, we've all been like too high and or
Mm.
get that sense of paranoia of whatever, um, that level of panic and anxiety and paranoia that you can get from like a really bad high, um, is basically the state. That if you're in that kind of state, then again it could be totally. It doesn't have to be quote unquote real if it's real to you, right? It'll still freak you the fuck out. Um, and then
Mm.
yeah, you can induce that in somebody else by by freaking you can freak the fuck out of people till they have a breakdown. Um, but I want to sort of change pace here real quick.
Yep.
Only because we've been talking a half an hour, and I don't want to get bogged down in politics and all of that.
Right.
I don't mean this. I felt like there should be a more smooth transition, but I just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I want I want that we could talk about the things that we actually were looking forward to talking about from last time.
Hmm.
Not to say this isn't an interesting topic for me. I mean, like I said, this is very much where my head's at, but I'm uh yeah, I'd like to, we said we want to talk about video games, and I'm just curious. I
Yes.
know I had seen some of your videos of like, hey, using like Super Nintendo games as like tarot cards, and I thought that was cool as shit. But I that's
Mm.
about as much as I know about your interest in video games, and I take that to mean you are a Super Nintendo. Like I don't know if that's sort of that genre or that era is sort of where your head's at, or just
Yeah,
curious what kind of
absolutely.
games you play or like and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that my focus tends to be like 90s era Nintendo
Mm,
games. That seems to be, yeah, where sort of I've, yeah.
great, yeah.
Yeah.
Same, by the way, yeah.
Mm, cool.
I have like so my it's funny. The last video game system I had was a Super Nintendo
Mm,
in the 90s, and then I didn't have I guess it's not true. Before my brother moved out, like when we were stuck living at home, my mom, my just before my brother got married, I think he got a PlayStation 1, and
mm,
I remember just playing like a handful of games for that. But anyway, point is like my heart is in Nintendo and Super Nintendo, and I didn't play games for years. And my current partner, when I met her a few years ago, she is into video games, and um, we got shortly after we got together, we got a PlayStation 4.
mm.
And so I've played a bunch of stuff for that, and kind of I guess like kind of got me back into it. But I still felt like I was feeling around the edges of this. Like I'm not really into a lot of the like 3D, like realistic people stuff like that. I don't,
Yeah.
so trying to find like games in this modern era that still appealed to me. And there were things that I found, but as soon as the Switch came out and it has a library of classic Nintendo and Super Nintendo games, I mean, I found myself just like that's what I wanted to play. I'm like, I literally just like I want to play these older games, either that I remember enjoying or um, want to
Yeah.
see if they how they hold up or but so it's partly nostalgia, partly just to kind of reevaluate. And I really enjoyed that experience.
Mm, mm, mm. Nice. Nice. Yeah, it's funny. That's cool. I would love to I would love to play those games again. Like it's funny. I also I haven't played games in a long time, really. Like, I'm kind of drawing on memory for a lot of it as well, or sort of
Yeah,
watching playthroughs and stuff.
yeah,
And I would like, yeah, I agree. I would love to get a Switch and have like access to all that. It's something interesting about descending back into that sort of past reservoir of stuff from an adult perspective. It's weird, all the emotions that those games woke up when, back in childhood, and then kind of like there is something like very uh yeah, I don't know, interesting about that process, about going back into that.
oh, it's
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah, like I
What have you been?
no, I mean, yeah, it's just like oh, so like I was so young I mean, relatively when Nintendo came out. So having like I guess like last year I replayed the original Zelda, original first Zelda for Nintendo,
Oh yeah.
and I was amazed at how small the map was, like how big it felt when I was younger. It felt like this massive world. Like I remember having the like fold out map from like Nintendo Power or whatever, and to have a map in front of you, and it's like, oh, okay, that's where this is. It just felt big because at the time that was huge, and that it's like,
Yeah.
when it's new, it's like, wow, and I've never seen a world that size that you can explore or whatever. Um, and then to like come back and be like, oh, actually, that's pretty tiny, and even like Metroid, which is a bigger map, is still pretty small. And I don't know. I don't know where they are at the moment, but I had some numbers written down for. See, this is good for revealing here, but I had actually some numbers where I think it's like I kind of went through and was curious, and I want to say like the Zelda map was like, let's just say like 16 by 16 or something, and the Metroid map was like 32 by 32 or something.
Right.
Like, these are just approximations, but that was very interesting to be like, oh, okay, that's not that big. But particularly by modern standards, obviously, but playing it still feels like a very immersive experience. So to realize, like, okay, you didn't need that big a map to make it feel like a really immersive experience. So I don't know if this is clear,
Yeah.
but to say, like, basically both being surprised at how small it was and being pleasantly surprised that it still felt plenty big enough,
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I don't know. I'm kind of like sort of improvising here, but there's a thought in my head that it's almost as if maybe what I like about those kind of Nintendo games is that I remember back in the day, I was never super into really realistic kind of games, games that really try to emulate perfectly um, the external environment and stuff like that.
Right.
And I think that there is something I find something kind of like magical or mythological about that, in the same way that in a ritual, to say something, you you're not actually using like fire necessarily. You maybe are using an object that represents fire, or you're using an object that represents the element of water or something, and maybe you are drawing a magical circle on the floor that represents the entire universe, even though it's a small circle. There is something in those games, like you say, that it's like by not attaining the realism of the waking world, it retains something that's somehow close to something magical in that sense. I mean, kind of being a little elitist here because everything can have that quality in a sense, but it's sort of it's as if the smallness of the world is like an enclosed magical circle. It makes it, there's something powerful about the limitations in terms of how unreal it is in comparison to the waking world. Like, yeah, I don't know. There's something sort of powerful about that. I think.
Yeah, I think it allows for. Oh, I found it. Sorry.
Hmm.
Zelda is 16 by 8.
Right.
It's not even 16 by 16, 16 by 8. And Metroid is 32 by 30. Okay.
And these are sort of
Um,
like do you mean like sort of like amounts of screens, like you?
correct, yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, like you can go west, for lack of a better, yeah, exactly. Each screen that you play on.
Mm.
So I guess with Metroid, some of those rooms might be 4 squares long,
Mm.
right? 4 screens long or whatever. That might make a room, but just to say it's 32 screens wide or whatever. And again, that's just really interesting that it's like, I don't know. That it's not even a chessboard. Um,
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah.
uh, it's that's just really interesting. Like I said, there was a reason I wrote those numbers down is because that was really interesting to me as to what could be accomplished in that space.
Mm.
Um, and I've actually looked. There's a website I found. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there's multiples. It doesn't matter. But there's a website I found that will show you like basically if you pull up any of these old video games, you can see all the screens, if you will, all the backgrounds kind of pasted together into a big chart.
Hmm.
So for Zelda example, it would be like just looking at that overview of the world map, um, which we've seen printed out or whatever. Um, but for Metroid, it's like, oh, you get to see all these little, purple rooms next to each other, and then here's a gray rooms, and here's whatever. And what's really interesting about that, and for Metroid, if you look at that, is they literally just cloned certain rooms. So a room in the northwest quadrant might be repeated
Mm.
in the southwest quadrant three more times or whatever.
Mm.
Literally the same bad guys, same background, same whatever, and that's probably how they were able to, if maybe the capacity at the time was one thing, that's probably how they allowed for uh, storage space and everything on those original games. It's just basically repeat a room, but when you're playing, it doesn't feel like you're repeating the room because you're walking. Let's say if I'm walking through a Metroid room that's 4 screens wide, if one of those screens has the same spawned enemies and backgrounds as a room all the way on the other side of the map, like you don't notice that, right?
Right.
It just feels like it's um, sort of part of the environment or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that is interesting how you can be having the same experience, right? You can be sort of encountering the same enemy with the same sort of programmed movement, but it's still in the whole, it feels like you're in this living environment where um I mean the image that comes to mind is like that kind those sort of like impressionist paintings where it's all made out of little sort of specks of paint on the canvas, but when you look at it from far away enough, it looks like a forest or something. Like there's something about how the kind of like the uncanny valley of it not being fully organic in the way that we usually understand that, and not being fully realistic. Uh, it leaves space for, oh, nice, cool. I saw your link. Let's see. It leaves space for the imagination to fill in some stuff, I think, and for emotions to fill in some
Absolutely.
stuff. Um, yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, I like this. These huge maps. It's funny. Exactly. You could be encountering the same kind of sequence of blocks and enemies maybe twice or three times and not even notice it because in the whole, it sits perfect.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm looking at a screen. Just like one. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to point this to you, but like basically, I'm looking at a screen right now where there is 3 screens in a row that are exactly the same, and then if you go up one
Mm.
row, it's repeated a fourth time in the row above. And it's like so, but it doesn't
Interesting.
feel that way when you're in it. So. Um, It's a fascinating thing of like almost like the old like Scooby Doo animation, right? The classic, like, oh, the background repeats.
Mm.
It's a similar sort of thing. Um, it's just really interesting how when you're in that space, and if anything, it adds to I think Metroid part of the I don't know world and like the adventure of that game is that you're constantly feeling lost and trying to make sense of this world, right? So the repetition again furthers like where some part of your brain is like, I feel like I've been here before. I know where I am,
Ah, yeah, right.
right? But it's like you're
Interesting.
furthering your how lost you actually are.
Yeah, I love this intersection between the requirements of game development. Like you say, there's certain things about this that simply depend on the space that is on the chip and stuff like that. The pure material requirements of that, combined with the spiritual effect it has or something, or the the how it works artistically. Like this sort of this in those kind of early games is really interesting. Yeah, how all of those tight limitations in terms of color, sound, and everything uh, actually bring out some effects that nowadays, without those limitations, people who make pixel type games still follow some of these kind of conventions because of how well they work, despite not having those limitations. Like there's
Yeah.
sort of something has emerged from those limitations that might not have been sort of consciously uh, sought after. Yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah, because now when you play something that's like a 3D, totally realistic thing and something repeats, it stands out in a never negative way, right? Like well, you
Mhm.
were going for realism, and now I just that looks like the same. It's like okay, well I've just repeated the same thing. Like I see that with not so much the graphics, but with like quests and stuff. So like I tried, and again I'm just admitting that like I haven't played a ton of modern games, but I've played a bunch in the last few years, and I did really like Fallout 4 was the first like real like modern game I played, and at first I was like, oh okay, like I found myself kind of getting into it, and then quickly it was like every quest that I was given in this seemingly like huge world, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like I love this like map that I could just keep exploring. That was really appealing to me. And then I'm like, oh, but okay, like it's sort of I go to this place and I fight these type of soldiers in their compound, and then you're
Yeah,
going to give me another quest to fight these other type of soldiers, maybe a different faction in this room, and now it's super mutants in this place, and it's these guys in this place. But it was like basically the same. And I get it's like a shoot 'em, shooting things, but like the quests all just felt like really repetitious very quickly. I'm like, oh, okay, go to this place and shoot everybody in the place. Got it. So this map that felt huge very quickly began to feel super small because I'm like, oh, there's
yes.
just not that much to do. All right, so I go around shooting everybody I see. Got it. Like that's kind of boring at that point. Like, I want to explore for other reasons.
That's funny. Yeah, that is, yeah. That's such an interesting paradox. Like I'm looking at screenshots of Fallout 4 now. I haven't played it, but I can definitely imagine how there's these like open, like mountainous spaces, and yet, like you say, it's as if the second you perceive the pattern that you're stuck in, like, oh, okay, I need to go from point A to point B and do the same kind of thing, you realize that you kind of see that you're stuck in a sort of tube almost. Like the game is
hmm
pretending to be this wide open space, but you're stuck in this extremely like tight tube of you have to go from point A to point B again and again. I'm sort of not specifically talking about for Fallout because I haven't
Sure, yeah. And
played
again,
it,
like
but
it was an enjoyable experience for a while. It was just, and again, it was so novel for me at first. When I'm like, wow, this is again. I mean, I went from probably the last. Like I said, if I'm real, I probably so PlayStation 1. I played like the first Metal Gear
mhm.
and um, something else like Spyro. You know,
Oh, cool.
which I liked. So actually funny they like remastered Spyro, and I bought it last year of like, okay, like I remember enjoying that, and that was still fun for a while. Um, but just to
Mm-hmm.
say, like, it's really interesting to see like what I again gone so many years without actually really playing something that it was Fallout was novel and I did enjoy it. I liked the sort of world, the way they when I say world, obviously there's like world building in a number of ways, but almost just like the right. So the idea is like, oh, an atomic war happens, but like in the 50s, so everything is kind of like it's this retro futurism.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So everything's like there's like laser guns, but like then like these old radios and or it's this weird mesh of time periods plus everything's like kind of broken. It was like an interesting experience and an interesting world, and I don't want to totally I did enjoy it, so I don't want to like shit talk it. I just again I realized too soon that I was like, oh, if I'm playing the game, the more I'm playing, as you say, the more you're seeing the limitations of the space. Where at first it seems big, like oh shit, this map is gigantic, and I've barely, when you hit the pause button, you're like, oh shit, I gotta go all the way over there, and this map's huge, and there's gonna be so much cool shit in between. And then you start to realize it's like, well, this is a lot of sort of repeated experiences. Um, Again, it's interesting how that the mind perceives it differently in the so say giving Fallout as an example, maybe the landscape changes more than in Metroid, right? Like if we could just compare these two examples for the moment. So where Metroid is literally repeating this room over and over again, but there's something with the pixel art and the simplicity that it all sort of blends together and feels like this part of this one big landscape. Whereas with Fallout, it's like, oh, I'm literally looking at like cool. They've put in the work in the graphics to make the landscape shift and change, and oh, this part is more rocky, and this part has trees, and this part has water, and whatever.
Mm.
And you have these changes in scenery and different visual cues to tell you that this is a different area of the map, but then the experiences are then sort of it's easier to see how repetitious the experience is in that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It's funny, it's interesting to compare these two games, like you say, because in Metroid and games of that style, you somehow, when you get into it with the music and with if you've sort of read like the story in the instruction manual and stuff like that, it you feel as if you're in a cave in an alien planet, right? It
Yeah.
feels that way. It may not look that way from like a traditional sort of like human perspective, but it really feels that way, like you say. And so in a game that has a really realistic environment, the way the environment feels, the whole mechanism in how you feel about that environment is different. It's funny that it gets flipped around, like you say. Suddenly, the other things stand out in a realistic game. Um, yeah, it's interesting, and then yeah, it's sort of like other kind of things come into play in in terms of like in analyzing it as you would a movie in terms of like a sync analysis, something like that, sync analysis, because the other elements are standing out, like you say. Maybe the fact that you're repeating tasks all the time may kind of without necessarily the game developers intending it to, maybe the theme of repetitive tasks may actually blend in with some of the themes of the story or something. It's funny when sometimes the actual game mechanism, the meta aspects of the game, kind of blend in with the content of it or something, and with Metroid, yeah, too.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point. Like, so you mentioned the booklets, and for me,
Mm.
I haven't thought about that before. Like like I said, I've I've been thinking a lot about video games in the last few years by reevaluating them at this later point in my life and just suddenly paying attention to game design, paying attention to a lot of things, just like literally thinking about them, and not just playing them or whatever. And something you said there is that I can still to this day picture all the drawings in the original Zelda booklet, like the little drawing of like this octopus that shoots a rock out of its face or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And here's Link in a cave throwing a boomerang at a bat, and these like beautiful drawings that were done. And you look at these drawings, and then you go into the game, and you're like, oh, this tiny little red, you know, amorphous blob. Oh, that's the octopus. Totally. I totally see that. And
yeah,
it's like you already it tells you, as you say, this is a cave, even if it doesn't really look like it's a cave. There's some that I guess I hadn't thought about how that other artwork um,
mm,
really added something. Really sold the illusion. When you talk about the uncanny valley and all that sort of stuff, I feel like the and it's funny because even those drawings, they're not realistic drawings, right? They're still these sort of fantasy um, illustrations. They're cartoony or whatnot, but they're clear. They're clear what they are. Oh, this is a man throwing a boomerang at a bat in a cave. Got
yeah.
it. And it's interesting to consider how those booklets further, prepared the mind for what you were going to experience. Because I remember just being a kid, and if we got a Nintendo game, that's what I would do. Is I would just sit there and flip through the book for an hour before I even turn the game on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you saying you had the same experience?
That's so weird. Yeah, yeah, because it's as if I really like that aspect of the booklet being a part of the game. Right? I feel maybe today different kind of mechanisms are in play, but it's interesting how we tend to think of the video game, the actual video game, as being just what's on the screen, and then that's all you need to play it, kind of thing. The console, the game, the screen, the controller. But it's funny when the a piece of paper, the booklet, is part of the game. It's like an appendage of the game. It like because in many of those games, there is no way of knowing what the story is without reading that.
Correct. Yeah.
Um, so it's as if there is this dangling piece of paper that is like a this arm of the video game that is it's like an inescapable part of it, but it's separated from the video game materially, and in terms of media, it's a completely different type of media, and that weirdly gives those old games a weird sort of multi-dimensionality because the game spans different dimensions. It's happening in a book, it's happening on a screen, and it's happening in your imagination. Like it's sort of this weird thing, and and like you say, it is interesting how seeing that octopus in the manual in a realistic 3D game, you would encounter that octopus and you would be able to shift your camera perspective to get a good view of that octopus from any perspective. But it's funny how in those games, the only clear image of that octopus you saw was like one or two. That's the only time you saw that octopus, and yet you encounter it again and again in the video game in its pixel format. And there is something really weird going on there with the 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 single image. Um,
Yeah.
and
It's literally iconic, right?
right,
It is
yeah.
the
Oh,
it's the icon of an octopus. It
yes.
is
Yeah.
it's a hieroglyphic. It's
Mm. Ah, man, yeah, I like that. Yeah, there's something like religious about that. Exactly. It's like it's the because exactly as a kid, I would really like worship these kind of manuals and draw the octopus or draw that picture of Link because it's the only material you had of that. It's
Mhm.
and it's funny because yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot to think about there. It's not necessarily like better than other types of games, but there's something like that, something about that and how it sits. And I would be interested to see how it sits within the historical context. What's happening outside? Like um I don't know. That's just sort of a
Well, I
stray
find
thought.
myself thinking about, so probably in that same time, if I bought a an album,
Mm.
oh, here's a band I like just put out a new album, what's the first thing I do? Is like on the way home, I'm reading the booklet inside. I'm reading the lyrics, I'm looking at the photographs, I'm looking at
Yeah.
that. This thing that has prepared me for the world you're about to enter.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah.
Hey, so this is, for lack of a better term, this is the story of this music. Even if it's not like as literal as a concept album or something, it's still like, hey, this is the vibe we're going for. This is, if I read the lyrics beforehand as I'm flipping through the book and read the lyrics beforehand, and then when I go to sit down and I hear the song for the first time, I'm able to just, instead of trying to pick out the words, I'm able to like take it in as a bigger experience. You know what I mean? Like it totally changes how. So just hearing the song for the first time and kind of listening to music, kind of listening to make out words, kind of this, kind of that. You've already prepped your mind, prepared yourself for the space you're going to enter. That you not necessarily like you can sing along, but I mean, I suppose you could, but I would never
Yeah.
do that on a first listen, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
but like there's something like on a subconscious level that you're able to play along. You're able to meet that artist in that space. Hey, this is what I was going for. I want, like I loved, like I loved X-Men as a kid, and there was I don't know if you've ever played. There was an X-Men Nintendo game, and it is
I don't think so.
horrible. It is so bad. It is so bad, so bad.
Hmm.
But I would still play it from time to time because there was something about like, well, I know this little blue blob is supposed to be this guy, and that's cool to me.
Yes.
I want to be able to like meet you in that space of like, oh, this thing that looks nothing like Iceman. Okay, if you're telling me that's what that is, I can meet you there. Sure. It's almost like when we talk again, if we talked about the uncanny valley,
Mm.
we're not realizing how the magic trick. It's funny, with something like psyops and stuff like that. It's almost like
Mm.
talking about how your mind can be primed to be receptive
Yes.
to the illusion. So, in that
Yeah.
sort of sense, this is actually a very much in the same line of like, hey, if you tell me I'm going to be entering a cave and that's what those brown squares are, I got you. And now everything's about like how do we fully render every detail of a cave so it looks like actual rock, when really all that was needed is if you tell me that's a rock, I believe you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny how it's like the realistic game doesn't account for the fact that what makes a cave. See, here's the thing: what makes a cave realistic isn't just how it looks, but how you're using it, to put it one way or something. Like if the cave in the realistic game is always serving the same purpose, and you kind of see that pattern, you perceive that actually the cave may be realistic, but the design is very simplistic, then um, I don't know that there's an interesting lesson here, I think, about realism. That realism doesn't just have to do with the senses in that way, right? It's also there's something relational. Is how you relate to
I,
it. There's an interesting lesson here, I think, about realism. That realism doesn't just have to do with the senses in that way, right? It's also there's something relational. Is how you relate to
I,
it.
I want to.
Like,
I'm actually having a different
right.
realization. Well, just because you mentioned senses, I am having a realization about sensory awareness in this, and it's all like so. If you're talking like writing,
Mm.
there's a very common phrase I'm sure you've heard where it says "show, don't tell."
Ah, yeah.
Are you familiar with that? All that what that means?
I think yeah, like sort of
Instead of like dumping exposition of like, oh, funny when I was, my yeah, I was really upset about the loss of my parents, so I became a superhero to kill the Joker.
yeah.
Like don't tell me that, like show it, like let me feel that go on that emotional ride.
Mm.
Or when you encounter this person, if I see you react in such a way, then I already infer a lot of this backstory and whatnot. So that's what in writing show don't tell means. But I almost feel like what we're hitting at here in a weird way with this gaming reality, the digital reality, and all this sort of stuff is tell, don't show. Like
Uh-huh. Right. The like the modern games tell and don't show. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, there's something to think about that. Um, it makes me think of something we were talking about last time in regards to sync videos as well, of how there is a way in which a sync video can become very powerful if you show and don't tell, right? If you don't like mathematically outline every single sync that you want to share.
yeah.
There is something like powerful if the sync video is like an old pixelated video game, right? If it's not entirely high fidelity in regards to what you were, I don't know, what was in your head. I- I'm also thinking of like the instruction manual. I find it fascinating how then the importance of the manual gained like it gained potency in later games. I think I haven't played the game you mentioned, the first Metal Gear Solid, but I've seen people play it, and I remember that there was information in the manual and in the actual box for the game that was crucial for the game. There was like this sort of breaking of the fourth wall thing where there were certain things
Oh, like
that
here's your confidential
yes,
dossier from yeah.
exactly, and you so that the game on the screen requires the cardboard box and the manual
Mm-hmm.
as a part. It's like it's an object within the game almost, but you're holding it in your hands, like this sort of thing. Yeah,
I
and
don't remember that in Metal Gear. I trust your memory. I just to say I don't remember it, but I have a very vivid memory from this other game. What was that? Okay, so this was for original Nintendo, and it was either I think it might have been this game called Star Tropics. I don't know if you know that game at
Okay.
all. Um, I
Yeah.
think that might have been it. But regardless, it was this game where it's exactly what you're talking about, where like, do you have, here's your instruction booklet, here's your this, here's your that. Well, get this. Inside this box was like a blank piece of paper.
Mm.
All right. And it was just like, here's like five different things in this packaging, and one of which was just like a blank piece of paper. And me and my brother threw it out. Oh, this is just like a piece of paper in this box. Blah, throw it out. And it wasn't until you were like three-quarters of the way through through the game that they're like, "Hey, that paper that we gave you, um, wet it with a sponge, and it'll reveal a hidden message."
Oh my God.
And I'm like, "Fuck!" We threw the shit out. Yeah. So
Wow. Fuck.
that's just fun. Like,
Ah, I love
that
that.
was, in a way that's like so revolutionary that these people did that. But
Mm.
my experience of it as a child was like, it went right over my head right away. I'm like, what is this? Okay, we don't need this.
Oh man. Yes, I love that. It's also some of this stuff we've been talking about. It's making me think of psychedelics and Terence McKenna in some way
Mm.
because, like you were saying, the manual is kind of preparing you for the experience. It's kind of like getting you in the right zone, in the right set and setting for it to not be too confusing. Because otherwise,
Sure. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
it's like in a lot of these games, even just the controls, like how to use the buttons, isn't explained in the game. You need to read the manual. So if you were to turn the game on without reading the manual, without knowing anything about the game, it could be just a kind of chaotic, confusing experience. Like you say, you need to sort of like oil the wheels of your mind. You sort of like grease your mind so that it flows with that game. You need to get into that space before you go into the experience almost. It's like a sort of initiatory, like shamanic um, thing about that, I think. You're going into a pretty traumatic, weird place full of enemies and stuff that you don't understand. And it's all kind of like blocky and pixely, um, very alien compared to, I don't know. So yeah, no,
I just dropped in the
oh,
chat here. This is the original Zelda booklet, right? And it says here, please read this instruction booklet to ensure proper handling of your new game, and then save the booklet for future reference. And there's just something, simple in there. But um, have you read, or are you familiar with the psychedelic experience, like Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, basically based off the Tibetan Book of
yeah.
the Dead?
I remember listening to an audiobook version of that a long
Cool.
time ago, but I can't.
Basically, that was their the what you
Oh,
described of
right.
like, hey, you read this thing and it prepares you for this state. That
Mm,
was basically how they envisioned the whole. They're like, hey, this Tibetan Book of the Dead is literally that. So it's like you read these things to prepare you for this bardo state, this death state, and this you could read the same thing to prepare you for the psychedelic experience. So it's literally like that is the game guide or whatever of like, oh, and when this happens, do this. I mean, it's as
yeah.
literal as like there are parts of the Tibetan Book of the Dead where it's like, and then if you see like a blue light with these demons floating around it, that's good. Avoid that, but go towards
Yes.
this thing that looks like this, and it's literally like describing here are the enemies to fight in this room, and
Yeah. It's that's really funny because I think that's probably my initial interest in psychedelics was definitely came from my love of video games. Like my interest in lucid dreams and psychedelics and anything that has to do with entering into another kind of sensory experience, another sort of world. And so vice versa, you could also almost say that you could sort of backtrack that thought and say that maybe there is a way in which an interest in video games is also an interest in dreams, or in an interest in, like, that even as a kid maybe you're drawn to the experience of immersing yourself into a vision that is different from the material vision you're having at the moment. Something very kind of primal like that. It wakes that up. Um, yeah, it's interesting. This manual is amazing, really. All these sort of cinematic drawings to represent
Oh
all
yeah.
pixelated stuff.
It's also, I forgot they did this where they put the drawing and the pixels next to each other. I totally forgot that.
Aha.
So I just remembered the drawings, but it's like literally like, hey, this is what a heart container looks like. So when you see this icon, that's what that is. Just so you know, like look at these like rubies. Here's a drawing of like a gemstone, and then it's like, hey, this.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
so um yeah. It's really interesting how has these side by side comparisons of, again, like it's like a key in the sense of like table of correspondences, like on a map. Oh, if you see this, that means it's the capital city, right? It's like
Mm,
that kind of like legend or key, which is
mm.
funny. We're talking about the Legend of Zelda, and he's got all these keys like this. That's maybe like silly puns, but there's something there where it's like all this kind of language swims in the same territory.
Yeah. Well, it's funny now you mention that, because a lot of these original Nintendo games are maps, basically, right? It's a map. You can move around the map, but it's organized as a map. Like, you can print it out on a piece of paper. Like, the game itself is a map. You're reading the map by walking through it. Um, yeah,
Precise.
yeah, something.
In the game world, the map is the territory.
Right, right. Yeah. And then, like, there's this image at the beginning of the manual which seems to be like a model, like a papier-mâché kind of like clay model of the
Isn't
map.
that beautiful?
I love this kind of stuff, and I love, like, Nintendo seems to do this a lot. And that is it also kind of like, it's so strange, because then this is what makes the experience so strange, I think. So here's the thing, because as a kid, you're having to take all this in, where you being shown a 3D kind of model version of the game that you're going to play. You're also being shown a 2D um, fantasy art version of that world in
Yeah.
the drawing. And then you're also being shown the simplified pixel version that you're playing. So you're already aware, you're doing a weird sort of sync thing in your head, where
Hmm.
you're having to triangulate an abstraction from that, because you know that all of these things represent this world. It's somehow, it kind of like pushes you towards feeling that the world they're talking about is something numinous that sits between all of these different representations of it, or something. Because there's so many representations of it, you can tell that it sits between these things or something. And yeah, there's something kind of mm, yeah, I don't know, there's something interesting about that. Uh,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah, this is so interesting. Like, to think of it in those terms because as soon as you said the 3D map, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. That there's literally multiple, and there's literally more than that. Like here's a map within a map of the labyrinth, for example, right? Where you're getting like that yellowed paper with the black dots, and if you look at page 33 of this Zelda booklet,
Oh, right.
right? So like,
Yes.
and then but then they've given you a different map on page 43. So it's like all these different, just like it really speaks to me in that, Crowleyan table correspondences, all like this equals this equals this equals this equals this, and by giving
Yeah.
you all these different representations of the same thing, it feels so real because it's like, oh, I get it. Yeah, this is in a way, these are all representations. Instead of like one being the real, they are all signifiers. The clay model at the very beginning is a signifier. The fantasy drawing is a signifier. The pixel art is a signifier. The
Mm.
maps are everything is a signifier. The only thing that is signified is this imaginal realm that exists in your head.
Yeah.
Um, it's amazing how it does that.
Yeah. And it's funny because like then it gets so weird as well because when you start looking at video games from that era, Nintendo games from that era, a lot of them, in my mind, seem to have very similar kind of themes, kind of classic fairy tale sort of themes, but like like I'm looking at it's a different era, but I'm looking at Mario 64 a lot at the moment, and it seems to all be about this sort of like you're well, to begin with, in a lot of these games, you're collecting shiny golden things, right? You're collecting shiny golden things, and
Totally, yeah.
you're facing some sort of a beast at the end of it, and you're climbing up a mountain. And so at the end, it almost seems as if The Legend of Zelda and Mario and Metroid, they are all like also signifiers of something that stands in between them, kind of thing. Almost as if um, it the whole Nintendo thing from that era to me all really feels very of this nature. Um, yeah, and it's interesting, especially when you consider, like you were saying before, about the actual limitations of the software and stuff like that. Like that in a sense, you collect golden things because that was sort of, that's just one of the easy kind of games to program, I guess, or like that. There's sort of there are ways in which the mythological content is kind of a part of the material limitations of the game.
Right, it has to be a shiny object so that it stands out from everything else on the screen.
Mm,
Right,
mm,
like what is again? It has to be iconic. Oh, here's a thing that I recognize as this is different from. It's not a bad guy. It's not structural like landscape. This is
right.
something different. Oh, of course, shiny gold yellow thing. It's like it's primal, right? It's like, oh, I can easily pick that out. So as you say, that's like almost built into the mechanics of how you would just classic limitations of almost like what you have to make, and then how does that play into the mythology you mentioned, like uh, the questing for the gold and fighting the beast, and it reminds me of this, classic like not just knight fighting a dragon, but the symbolism of that, of like what does that mean for the knight to take on a part of that beast, to become part of the dragon, or to um
Mm.
the dragon like hoarding his gold and all these sorts of the metaphors, both like the alchemical imagery, the mythological metaphors that are just built into all that sort of stuff. Um, I have watched a documentary about some guys who designed games for Atari. I think I watched two different documentaries about like early days of Atari, and what was interesting about that was that the at that point the games were being designed by the software engineers. So like you you were building a game from scratch. So but
Right.
like even like your graphics were done with code. Your
Yeah.
everything was like it's different where now you could have an artist draw your even your sprites. If you're in the state of once you get to say Nintendo and you go like, all right, we have somebody who designs all the characters and they do the artwork and somebody else would do the programming and blah blah blah. But for Atari, it was literally the characters were designed in the code. Everything was designed by basically one guy, and so in a way, maybe these classic like tropes, if you will, make sense of oh shit, okay, I need to like what do I make this world about? What is the point of this game? And so you sort of have these classic adventure stories. Um, Again, maybe these are we can explain how this happens, but what it means to be playing the hero's journey, if you will, or these different things. Like fucking, I love in this Zelda booklet. I forgot they literally refer to it. Sorry if I can find it again. Page 18, right? Here's
Uh-huh.
the Link
Yep.
meets all sorts of challenges above and underground, and it always says the overworld, the underworld. These are the different
Yeah.
spaces. Though the light and the dark, these are what these look like in these different spaces. I mean, it's just like it's so potent.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
fascinating.
And like I'm kind of speculating here, but it's like I actually like at the moment my I work as a translator, and I'm for a while I've been translating video games actually recently,
Wow.
and
Okay. And multiple languages, or
I mostly from Japanese into Spanish actually.
wow. Okay.
Yes,
Cool.
yeah, and it's I mean, yeah, I've really enjoyed it because it's I've actually translated a lot of manuals for old games like this, like when they're being like digitized and turned into phone games and stuff like that. And so they anyway, so I've been sort of looking at a lot of old arcade game manuals and stuff.
Wow. Okay.
And it's really I'm not sure what the process is, but I get the feeling that a lot of these games back in the day and today as well, they are made really sort of with a tight deadline, and that stuff like the manual, I think, doesn't actually get that much time put into it. And that's my impression. I may be completely wrong here, but I find that very interesting because I get the feeling that what is written in these manuals, all of this description of the enemies and stuff, is probably like written by a group of people in a very short period of time. I think I may be wrong, but I feel as if that were the case, it would be really interesting because it seems as if it's the it's like there is something almost like automatic writing about it. It's this sort of the first thing that comes to mind almost like I'm sort of reading descriptions of enemies or something, this enemy called Zola, half fish, half woman who lives in the water. I don't know when she sticks her head out of the water. There's sort of things that it's as if many elements of the manual seem to me to be like automatic writing, like just something that just spurts out from the collective unconscious of the group of people who are involved in the game. And so there's a lot of like insights I find in these manuals into what these places and objects meant to the people making them. Like, it becomes clear that, oh, this enemy it's supposed to be a scary enemy because that's how they are writing about this enemy, is, you know, how scary it is. Or this enemy is supposed to be cute because of how they're writing about it. And this thing about the underworld, the overworld, it all kind of, when you read the whole manual together, it very often constellates, especially under some sort of like in a sync kind of perspective. You start to see sort of weird patterns between things that that seem to be due to how collectively these things are made and how quickly. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I know just a little bit about the history of the Zelda in particular, and I'm no like I'm not like very well versed in this, so keep that in mind. But I am aware that the original game designer really didn't want to explain much of anything. His whole point for Zelda was, I remember reading something where he says when he was a kid, he would just like go out and explore in the woods by himself, and he wanted that experience. That was the experience he wanted to create for people. Is you just go out and you kind of get lost, and you find your way around, and you'll figure it out. And he really didn't want to explain. He didn't want a map. He didn't want an explanation. He didn't want anything, all that sort of stuff. And
nice.
I don't know how it was released in Japan, if he got to, like how more sort of minimalized it was released there. But I do know that the American audience was terrified of like the American distribution people were like, I don't think we could just give people this game, and like that's not going to work, you know. So a lot of what you and I are really appreciating here is almost like the American distribution guys being like, well, this needs to be dumbed down for American. And it's like that's that. I don't think it was meant in that way necessarily, but they just knew like it would be a lot easier for them to market. Here's a game, like we'll explain to you how to play. So as I'm like looking through this booklet, and it's like, I mean, it's literally saying like, press the right button and you can scroll to the next screen. You know, like it gets as simple as that. But I don't know. There's something really interesting about. We're trying to speculate here what the process is of how these books are made, and it's like, so it's someone's job to take this game that's I assume at that point is probably finished, and now they want to release it in America, and they're like, well, how much do we have to explain to people? So there was something I saw. Okay, page 31, and it says. Caves are not the only places you can see. What was that you said? I looked for the caves in every nook and corner, but I couldn't find them anywhere. Well, you know, they're not the only places you can see. Link just might be able to pass through the pathways he hasn't been able to get through by using something else. Get the gist? And it's like implying like there's this mystery, there's whatever. But even the drawing there is showing him going through grass. So they're like, how do we explain to people that like you should maybe try like burning the grass? Like we'll give them a picture of Link in the grass and say like try something else. It's like hint, hint. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. Even like, yeah, I love this. It's as if I, even in the manual that they're trying to keep these sort of layers of mystery. It's explained, but it's still you. The manual is a game. You have to. The manual itself is a puzzle game that you need to solve somehow. Like you need to solve like the correspondence between the image of the grass and the text in order to solve
yeah.
the mysteries in the game itself. Um,
I mean, it literally says like on almost every page 29, it says at that little red stripe at the bottom.
mm,
The water of life is a medicine that can beat anything to those who don't have the right. You have to find that out yourselves. Good luck. And then page 30. In order to show your credentials, you have to. Oh, I'm sorry. Page 31 about fairies. Fairies in the springs give Link extra life. You can find them at the dot dot dot. Sorry, that's also a secret. It's like all these attempts to.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's weird. I think this is what I find so fascinating about approaching video games with the same kind of perspective that sync blogging has approached movies. Because when you're looking at a movie, you you're looking at a different data set. It's because the movie is this linear exposition of images. Like you start at the beginning of the movie and then you end at the end of the movie. But in a game like Zelda, you can go up, you can go down, you can go left, you can go right. There's like a non-linearity to it that makes the it's kind of like you were saying about the developer of the game, right? That it's a different kind of walk in the woods from movie sync in some way. You I don't know. It's just yeah. It's a different data set, I guess. It's
So okay, so can you are you comfortable talking about your job a little bit more? I'm really curious.
yeah,
If it's nothing secret, I'd love to hear like what does that entail and what kind of projects you do.
yeah. Sadly, like it's not like I have done some games that I thought were interesting. Like basically, I've and it's not like it's me and like a big sort of team of translators. And I work freelance, so I've worked for these people, and I've also worked for like other agencies, and um, we've done all sorts of stuff from like indie games to re-releases of old arcade games to actual sort of I've I've, I've worked on a few modern Switch and PlayStation 4 things. Um, but yeah, it's been really interesting seeing all these different formats of because sometimes you're translating the manual, but sometimes you're actually translating in-game text and in-game dialogue. You realize that when a game is printed out as a text sheet, it's a really bizarre thing because you're constantly like jumping from intelligible dialogue to just blunt kind of like press left, press right kind of things. Like the amount of text in the game is it fluidly shifts from human kind of communication to like machine like commands and there's a weird sort of poetry to that I think um, but sadly I have mostly been translating phone games recently and I'm a little sort of annoyed about that because when you translate phone games nowadays, you realize that they are just ridiculous sort of money making objects. Like everything in phone games now, as far as I can tell, is like a slot machine. You kind of maybe the game is free. You can download it for free in the App Store, but then the whole game seems to be, this is a kind of a change of topic, but it's like the whole phone games seem to be designed around like maybe you find a golden chest and it's got this amazing object in it, but in order to use it, you need this other object, but in order to use that other object, you need to access the store and pay for it or something. And it all kind of, the game has this, it has the same kind of image on the outside as a Zelda game or anything like that, but because the game is free in the App Store, it needs to make its money through the user paying for objects. So the whole game nowadays,
in-app purchases, right?
right? And it's so weird to see how games have like morphed into, it needs to be an advertisement of itself. The game itself is selling itself in real time as you are playing it. In the case of Zelda, in this game, you pay for the game once and that's it. The game doesn't need to worry about making you pay for stuff. Like it's weird how the whole kind of model of phone games sort of squeezes games into, it turns a game into an ad. I don't know. That's just, I'm kind of like angry about that at the moment because I'm having to translate this kind of stuff. But so yeah, that's sort of a bit of what I've been doing. Yeah, but it's fascinating. Yeah, seeing all of this.
Yeah, I can't imagine like the whole like phone. So just a I don't think I told you this. Maybe I told you this last time, but I don't think so. So I had recently, a few months ago, I got this like really clear sort of like, I don't know how else to describe it, like download of an idea of like, I saw this game, like in my mind, I see this fully fleshed out game. And I was kind of like, after I'd played some games, and okay, I played this, played this, and then I would find myself looking for like, what's something I would like to play, and I just couldn't find something. Found a lot of games that were like kind of close, so similar, but I found I was really craving a very specific experience. And like, I can fully articulate what that experience is, So anyway, I got this like fully formed download of this is the game that I want to play, and I could just picture it. And I've done a bunch of drawings, and I've done all these different stuff, and I started looking into like, what does it take to build such a thing? So I downloaded the Unity software, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
It's basically just the gaming engine, and so it works somewhat like my video editing software. I feel like, okay, there are things that my experience with editing audio and editing video and all this sort of stuff that seems really clear to me. Like, oh, I know how I can do a lot of this stuff. Just like jumping in, I feel like I have a certain advantage there. But then everything else is code, which I don't fucking know. And I'm just like, I'm struggling with like, how do I learn all this coding and whatever? So I joined a few different like Unity forums and things like that to see, just like learn a little bit more. And I keep seeing all these people being like, well, why don't you just make it for a phone? Like, why don't you make it a phone app or whatever? And it's like, I would never want to play a game on my phone. Like, that just sounds so, I don't know. Like, again, like, that sounds so unappealing to me. I mean, there's I take that back. There's like something very simplistic, sure. If it's like a puzzles or something, that would probably be fine on my phone. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't. Even in all this experience of like what, again, for me, of like realizing what do I actually like about the experience of playing games, the has been a very revealing, like to me, again, just like literally like realizing as I play, oh, I do like this, oh, I don't like this.
Mm.
Just every game I play, as I'm experiencing it, I'm kind of analyzing what what about this aspect is enjoyable, what about this aspect is not. Like why this game looks like I should really like it. Why don't I? What is the blah blah blah. So
Interesting. Yeah.
I keep having that experience, and the idea of like sitting on my phone and trying to do something just sounds so unappealing to me.
Yeah. I guess I haven't. Yeah. I've never played really. uh, Like I've played. I know what games on phones like feel like and look like, but I've never really delved into that world. And I agree. I think that I would be interested to find a game that used the phone in an interesting way that was particular to the phone, like you said, because otherwise, I don't know. I guess I haven't sort of. I find there's probably there's an interesting potential there, but I haven't really sort of dived too deep into what it could be. Um, I would still prefer to just play it on my my computer or something. But it's a weird machine. Definitely, I think it could be something.
So you said about playing on your computer. Do you have like Steam or?
Well, that's the thing. Recently, I haven't really been playing much. The latest games I've played have all been sort of purchased from this site called Good Old Games, GOG, and it's just old it's just old PC games, like old adventure games like Myst and stuff like that. I've
And where did you find this?
It's this website called gog.com.
G
GOG.
O GOG. Oh, okay. Wow, like Gog and Magog. Okay.
GOG and
Oh, do you not know what that is?
I know. Looking it up.
Gog and Magog. GOG, like George Orange George.
Yes. Uh,
Um, yeah, that is.
oh yeah.
So they are biblical figures, and they were I think those were like the CIA code names for George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr.
Oh right.
Um,
Wow. Weird. Okay.
Anywho, sorry. Okay, so um, please go on.
Oh
Sorry.
no, so basically just like it seems as if I'm doomed to play old games like that sort of if the I've, I've the last games I've been playing have been like 90s graphic adventure games basically, and that was a while ago. Um but I it's funny, I also tried learning to make a game, and I agree that the programming was my main problem. I I tried RPG Maker, which seemed to just um, allow for this sort of like Zelda style game. But
What was that experience like to use one of the? Because I looked at those and I was like, I just felt like that was too specific.
mm,
But yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff like that. Or now there's like Mario Maker, and there's like a Mega Man Maker, and all that sort of
yeah,
stuff. So
well, yeah, I realized. because I made a short little like test game. I'll send it to you. It's sort of just a 5 minute long kind of thing, and I realized that I spent the entire process trying to overcome the limitations of the program, like because like you say, it's as if there is a desire to make something that isn't that type of RPG. It was interesting to try to make that with something with a tool that is designed specifically to make that. Like use a tool that's specifically for a type of game, and then try to make something that isn't that type of game exactly. Um, but I would love to, yeah, to be able to bring ideas like that into focus. I mean, I've always thought like this is a conversation we've had with Jordan Barty a lot is it would be cool to make sync instead of sync videos, make sync games or sync sort of like environments. If you could create like a 3D environment that you can walk in, like a sort of virtual temple almost. And in each room of this temple, there are like objects pertaining to like Back to the Future or objects pertaining to like different movies. And then the very process of playing the game would walk you through a sort of initiatory kind of like, sort of like a sort of the sort of typical sort of temple mystery kind of thing where you're walking through the temple, seeing these weird instead of exposing correspondences in a YouTube video, show them in a virtual environment that you can actually play in and interact in. Like that would be really cool.
Almost like walking. That's cool as shit. Like walking them through. Hey, this is first you collect the wire. Yeah. Whatever.
Right, exactly. Something
Now you're
weird.
tightrope walking across the Twin Towers.
Wow, yeah, exactly. That'd be interesting to, yeah.
Wow, that's a great idea. I had thought about making a so I had made years ago a really simple, almost like a choose your own adventure HTML game. So
Nice.
I made a series of like I don't know, like it's like 150 different images with text, and then it's like each image gave you a choice of like this or this, and I make it so that you can have just these branching pathways of like if you decide this, then it takes you to this next part of the story and whatever, right?
Nice.
And made some of that years ago, and I had thought about doing something like that with sync stuff. But yeah, that's a really cool idea. One of us is gonna have to learn fucking code.
Exactly. That's the problem. That is, I feel as if um, these are sort of ideas that require. It's so frustrating. Um, it's still beyond me at the moment. But it'd be cool. There's this Reddit community called Game Arcane, like a sort
Okay.
of pun on arcade, and they it's really cool that they've often sort of been talking about like it's sort of a community of people who are simultaneously interested in video games and like magic and any sort of like alchemy, the occult, stuff like that. And there is constantly this sort of idea of it would be so cool to make to make video games as rituals almost that the player sort of partakes in some way that the game itself is a sort of you're touching the water element, then you're going into the fire room, and then you're entering into the this other room that unites like this sort of weird kind of a game that is maybe the game is conscious of itself as game almost. It's conscious of itself as as an experience that may have a certain effect in the psyche and the environment of the player somehow. I don't know. So anyway, yeah, there's stuff to think about in that kind of area.
Yeah. I mean, so just to
Right. Well,
say,
yes.
my plan here
Hmm.
is that I'm gonna make this fifth episode of Hindsight 2020, and then I mean the next project I really want, like, that's, this is Hindsight 2020 is taking me like a year to make. Um, I started. I mean, not only like the planning. Yeah, I've been working on that almost exactly a year now, um,
Wow.
and I'm not done with it. So
Yeah.
my plan is then once that is done and out, is to probably take another year and try and learn code and trying to work on this video game is literally the next thing I want to do after I finish the series. Um,
Well, like do you have what's the idea for this video game, or is it still sort of like just a under wraps kind of?
so okay, so
Mm,
let's quickly. Yeah, that reminds me. Let's shift gears here. And just to say, like, for this video game, it's for me. This is not about making money off that. I just want to quickly say is like
mhm,
it was more like I don't know what it would cost to hire somebody as a programmer. I imagine it's more money than I have. Right. So
yeah,
that's all I
yeah,
meant. Is
yeah,
like I would raise money to give to someone else.
yeah.
Basically,
Right.
of like, hey,
No,
I need this task. I want to hire you. You guys give
ab-
me money so I can hire this guy.
absolutely
Um,
no, and I think like that's that's one of the things I like about these kinds of Kickstarters and Patreons and stuff like that is that it's yeah, you can it's so nice to see that it's a way of raising the means to make the thing itself, right? Like it's that's cool to me because it's about materializing the object. It's not so much about the money that is going to be made from the game, but just the very act of making it possible. um, yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's like I have a job. I don't. This is not like a career for me. This is like
Mhm.
some weird thing that happened. It's like literally an idea that came to me that I feel like I need to make.
Mhm.
Um, But okay, so you messaged me the other day about like saying something about Patreon and YouTube and all this sort of stuff. And I just want
Mhm.
to say, like, we've talked about it over the years, and there have been times where we've done little things. Like we have a few like random episodes of 42 minutes or something on YouTube, and
Mm. Yeah.
I just want to say, if this was something you could even
Mhm.
I I think if you were to do it, so just a few things I want to say.
Yep.
One is that you might have to clip out like the beginning and ends of things where there's music for like copyright for YouTube.
Yeah. I was thinking. Yeah.
Um, so like for a lot of those older episodes have music either on them or a few of them. Every now and then there's something that has music like in the middle. But
Hmm.
for the most part, it's it's anyway. That would be something you'd probably want to keep an eye out for.
Mm.
I think it might be worth trying to start a new YouTube channel, like
Yes.
maybe just an always record, literally is what it is. Um, and if you were to do that work and you can get it so that you're not getting copyright flags, if there was a way to monetize it,
Hmm.
I you can keep that money. Like if you do that work that you want to upload those things and there's a way for you to profit off it, go right ahead. Because I don't have a way to like pay you for
Hmm.
your time to upload all those things, But if you can monetize that YouTube channel and make something, fuck yeah, go for it.
Oh well,
Um,
I mean, I was like, thank you. I mean, honestly, I was thinking more of like I'd feel bad if, you know, putting all of this content onto YouTube uh, for free sort of kind of undermines the project that is already in place in the website. You know, the whole.
no, no, not at all. So like I took the paywall down,
Mm,
I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe a little more. I have no intention of putting it back up. Like I I never want, it's a longer story, but I never wanted a paywall.
mm,
Um, and that caused a lot more grief than it was worth. Like just like having them, obviously it would be nice to have. So when we had it, what was really nice was that I no longer had to invest my own money into the website because like that website costs money just to run. Just like we have private servers and all these. There's just I don't know, probably about 60, 70, 80. I would say about $125 a month just to have the site, just to
mm,
run the site as it is.
mm.
It used
Yeah.
to cost us 200 and something a month because there was a point that I was paying somebody. I don't know if you know Guillaume. I was
Mm,
paying Guillaume, and well, not even good money. I was paying him $100 a month just to like be a webmaster, and if something did break, to be on call. Hey man, this needs fixed or whatever.
mhm.
Um, so it wasn't. I didn't have a lot of money to give him, but like that was. I used to pay that out of my own pocket, and then there was a point once we had the paywall that the site paid for itself, and that was really really nice that the site was paying for itself. Um, but at the end of the day, it's so much trouble and there's just so much bullshit that came from it. Once you involve money, everyone got like suddenly everyone's like, oh well, who's making this money? And I'm like, no one's making the money. It's fucking paying for the site. Like it's
Yeah.
the website is making the money to pay its own bills. And like finally it's something off my back. But everyone got really weird of like, oh well, I don't know. Maybe you're making money off this stuff. And I'm like, no one was worried that I was paying money, but suddenly you're worried that I'm making money. And it just became like a hassle, man. It just became like it
Yeah.
took the fun out of it. So I would rather I have no intention of ever putting that paywall back up. And so yeah, that if you go to our website right now, every Always Record is already free.
Mm,
So if you put it on YouTube, cool, that's already free. Um, Now here's the thing.
mhm,
Uh, I had looked into. Oh shit. Um, Andras had reached out to me a few months ago, and he found some service that for $20 a month, basically, it does like your distribution. So like again, when we started, none of this stuff was in place, right?
mm,
Um, you, if you wanted to get on iTunes, even you had to write code just to get your thing onto iTunes, and the code had to be like approved by iTunes.
mm.
And Guillaume wrote that for us, and we were able to get onto iTunes. But even still, it's not perfect. So like we could appear in iTunes, but we're not like really searchable. I don't know. Like again, it's just it goes over my head, and it was a pain in the
Yeah.
ass, and it was a lot of work to just get onto this one platform. And then suddenly there was like um, different services. Whether that's SoundCloud, Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher, whatever. All these different podcast distribution things. And we aren't on any of those. The only thing we're on technically is iTunes.
Mm.
So Andros found this thing that's for $20 a month. You basically upload your stuff to them and they put it onto everything. So we could be on Spotify, we could be on all these things. Um, if you were going through the trouble of going through these old episodes and like chopping out the music and stuff like that,
Yeah.
I would gladly, and like if you're just doing that for YouTube, and you got, so basically you would have, in order to get something on YouTube, you would have to download the MP3, chop off the front and back music,
Mm.
maybe put the graphic on it and render it as a video, and then
Yeah.
upload that to YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Now, in that step, suddenly you have an MP3 without music. Well, maybe if you're going to do that, I could then pay this company $20 a month for the distribution, and we start also uploading that same audio file to get it, and we'll, just try something like that, where it's like,
Yeah.
so you start a YouTube channel for Always Record. I'll use that same the chopped up MP3s you create, and we'll try and get that on Spotify or something. I would totally pay for. I have to look into if there's more hidden costs or whatever, but it looked like it wasn't a huge financial thing. Um, I would totally pay for that. Um,
Cool. I mean, I was thinking I'm sort of in a not exactly the same, but I'm in a similar situation in the sense that I would feel I would personally feel uncomfortable like getting money um for this for me. So if any money came from that, I would I think it would be a cool way to to pay precisely for these kind of costs, right? For the $20 a month or for like website maintenance and stuff like that. But anyway, so this is something we could talk about, in the future. But like, I I definitely like, and at the same time, like, I also think it's a cool idea to like. There's also the option of not monetizing the videos so that they don't have ads, which is also like a
sure, yeah. Well,
cool.
I, I just wanted to say, like I said, I guess from a consumer, like for me listening to stuff, I would of course want things without ads and all. I just wanted to offer that, like, that is going to be a lot. If you actually do that, that's going to be a ton of work. And I wanted that, like, if you act, like, if there was a chance for you to make something off that, I just want you to know that I'm okay. I would not be offended if you put an ad on it so you could make something for your time. Would not offend me whatsoever. If you're of the mindset that no ads is better, yeah, I mean, obviously, we all hate ads, right? Like,
Yeah.
so just know that it's out there for however you want to do it. So if no one's like, hey, you should do it like this, whatever you do is fine. I know there was somebody who uploaded a few episodes to YouTube a few years ago. I know around like episode 75. I don't know why that stands out. I think that was a Adam Gorightly episode. Um, but I remember somewhere around like 75 to 100, there was a guy who had uploaded just a few on his YouTube channel, never said anything to me. He was just uploading them to YouTube. And when I found them, I wasn't mad. Like, okay, cool. you know, um,
Yeah.
so um, it's really not like that. And like I said, all this stuff is, in a way, a lot of this, I think, archive has collected dust, and any new life that anyone wants to breathe into it is probably very much appreciated by all parties involved. So
No, that'd be yeah. It would be really exciting to see like I don't know. Yeah, I'd be intrigued to see, what kind of comments it gets or like stuff like that.
Mm.
I'm also sort of like wondering, and obviously we can sort of look at this as it goes along, the finer kind of like aesthetic points of what to use as a channel banner image, what to use as an avatar and stuff like that. I'll sort of we can message back and forth about that and stuff. It'd be nice to like make the channel look nice and stuff like that. But anyway, I'll that sort of
Sure.
something.
I don't know that I have any more like. So I very recently lost a hard drive, an external hard drive that had most of my work over the last 10
Oh
years
shit.
on it. Like just in the last month,
Oh,
that
right.
that hard drive is gone. I don't have the Photoshop files for these like the logo and stuff anymore, but this I just sent you here. Like this is you could feel free to use this logo if you need. I have Photoshop, and if you need some stuff kind of like made to a certain size, you tell me and I'll help you. I would totally do that. Like if it's like, hey, can you make a banner? It needs to be this size, or I need this. Tell me, and I'll totally help you out. Um, but this
Cool.
is probably the highest resolution version of that original logo that I have is actually on the website because everything else I have is gone.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Um, I mean, just to say, like,
Mm.
I should probably get going here soon. I'm probably you too, but
Yes.
just to say, I,
Yeah.
I had this really weird experience where, so my cat got sick, right, and I kept like the quarantine shit happened, and shortly into quarantine, my cat got sick, and I was like, I had this feeling that my cat's gonna die. I take him to the vet, and they're like, "Oh no, he's fine. It's just an ear infection." Blah blah blah. I'm like, it's fine.
Mm.
And then like 2 weeks later, I got to take him back. He's sick again, and they're like, "Oh well, we think it's this other thing." And I'm like, "Fuck, my cat's gonna die." And they're like, "No, it's this like really simple thing." Blah blah blah. Okay, we didn't notice that last time, but whatever. And this happened. I ended up taking my cat 5 times to the vet over the course of 2 months. And each time they were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
we think it's, no reason to worry. No reason to worry. No reason to worry." But like the whole time I was preparing myself that like for this and like even like with quarantine and like the idea of like was everyone going to die of coronavirus or it was just like I lost my fucking job. Like I lost my job in March of like, well, my bar is closed. You are out of work. Like you cannot show up to work. It is closed. Like so I lost my job. I lost and like I was like all these and I felt like there was this overall theme of loss of like accepting and dealing with loss. And oh, here's another thing. So in this happens in 1 week. They were supposed to reopen my bar. The first time they were supposed to reopen my bar before the city ended up delaying because of coronavirus. But when it was originally supposed to reopen, I don't know, that was like May 15th, I think.
Hmm.
And I go to work for one day for like a meeting. It wasn't like wasn't like a paid work day or anything. It was like you go for a meeting like, hey, this is what it's gonna take. We're gonna open on Friday, blah 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 blah. While I'm there, as I'm like leaving, I get a phone call from my partner that the stove caught on fire and she can't put the fire out and our kitchen's on fire. And I'm like,
Wow.
fuck, right? And I'm racing home and she's calling, I'm like, all right, call fire department, call whatever, blah, blah. And my whole, like, I'm just driving home like a maniac. And the whole way I'm like, well, she told me she's outside. She got two of our pets out,
Hmm.
only two. All right. And I'm driving home and thinking like, okay, what happens if like my other pets are dead? I would in this drive home, I'm having to make peace with these loss, right? Like, what does it mean if
Yeah.
like my fucking cat's dead? So my cat who ended up dying a few weeks later, but I'm like, okay, he didn't die from going. I kept thinking he was gonna die from going to the vet, but no, he's gonna die in this fucking house fire. I'm like, my computer. Oh God, all my work is gonna be gone, right?
Yeah.
So on this drive home, I'm making peace with like, well, if I come home and I'm fucking homeless and all my artwork is gone and all my pets are gone, I have to like, in a sense, I have to be okay with it. I have to prepare myself for that reality.
Yeah.
But we're very lucky. The fire department got here like super fucking quick, took care of it. There was very like they were so fast that there was only some damage in the kitchen, but like that's it. And so
Oh.
my office never got touched. But then a week later, the hard drive crashes. The thing that I'm like, oh shit, all this, I'm gonna lose it in the fire. I didn't lose it in the fire, but then the fucking machine dies.
Yeah.
My cat, that I was like, oh, the cat's gonna die in the fire. The cat didn't die in the fire. The cat died of fucking cancer. So it was like all these weird sort of series of synchronicities in one fucking week of like, you're gonna lose this thing. Oh no, just kidding, it's fine. No, you're gonna lose this thing. No, it's fine. No, you're gonna lose this thing. No, it's fine. And then I actually did lose all this stuff. So, I mean, in
Yeah.
a weird way, I'm like, I'm a little I'm like a little like traumatized. Like, fuck, yeah, that was a lot. But I'm also in a weird way like none of it was super shocking. You know what I mean? Like I kept the experience staggered in such a way that I don't know, that it made it like easier to handle, I think, or like I had time to like prepare myself mentally for it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's really, yeah. Is
but so just to say, yeah, I did lose years worth of work. I'm like, but like, a lot of it's like already out, like
mm,
videos that were finished and maybe like the raw forms and stuff like that. And um there anything that was like unfinished on there, like I kind of have, say, like the Suicide Kings book, like there's a PDF online that you can, like I rendered that off and put it online, so like that's backed up. I lost all the like notes and all the artwork for it and things like that, but oh well, I wasn't doing that book anymore anyway, like it kind of sucks, but it's also kind of fine. um I don't know. There's some like cool artwork and like old like photos and like memories, and there's stuff that I haven't even like figured out like all that I lost on there yet. But ultimately, I'm like, this is fine.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's weird. I know. That's such a weird thing about sync, how by grouping all these different kinds of loss together, it makes it more sort of necessary to like reflect on them in a in this sort of poetic way or something. Like it's like, okay, wow, I'm thinking about the idea of loss in some sort of abstract way, right? Like because of how all of these things are grouping together. That's really strange. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
well, on that note, I'm gonna let you go here. Um,
Yep.
it was really good talking to you. Thank you for listening to all my ideas of this game and stuff, and just for everything. I
Yeah.
really appreciate chatting with you, and um,
No, this was really nice. Yeah. I had a lot of fun.
all right. Well, I am going back to work this week. It is
Cool.
official. Everything's reopened.
Nice.
Um, so I don't know what my schedule will be like going ahead in the future, but I would love to, keep chatting. I'll just sort of keep in touch of like, oh, I really have no idea what my schedule is going to look like anytime soon, but I'll kind of sort of keep in touch. Maybe we can chat again.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'd love to reopen some of these like video game topics and everything. So yeah.